Good evening. Calling the Lake Elmo City Council meeting to order for Wednesday, November 6, 2024. If you'll all please stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. With A done on the agenda, we'll move on to approval of the agenda. It was in our meeting packets. If you've read through it and everything seems acceptable, I'll entertain a motion.
So move.
Second.
We have a motion and second to approve the agenda from, for tonight. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Agenda is hereby approved. Also, the minutes from the October 15th meeting are in our packet. If you've read through them and don't have any things of concern or changes, I'll entertain a motion on that as well.
Motion to approve the minutes from October 15.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second for the approval of the minutes from October 15th. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Minutes from October 15th are hereby approved. Do we have anyone that signed up for public comments and things that are not on the agenda?
We do not.
Okay, thank you. That was D. We have a presentation from the Network Now plan for Metro Transit. Welcome.
Good evening. My name is Cindy Harper. I am the manager of route planning Metro Transit, and here this evening to share a transit project we've been working on for about the last year and a half called Network Now, that's currently in the middle of its public engagement phase. With me this evening is Steve Basden, who is the senior transit planner. He's actually the planner who is responsible for Washington County. And so I'm going to give an overview of the proposal, and then he's going to talk about the part that you're probably more interested in, which is the specific impacts in Lake Elmo. So we're doing this project for really four main reasons. It's a pivotal time in our history. We saw ridership drop more than 50% between 2019 and 2020. We are rebounding. Also, though, we also had a 30% decrease in the amount of service that we're providing since the pandemic, with more than 60 routes that have been suspended, in many cases, for more than 4 years. We've also seen a significant change in travel patterns since the pandemic. There are fewer people that are commuting into downtown and the people who are using transit are using it really for more diverse all-day needs. The markets that we've seen that have been the most resilient in terms of ridership have been those that are on routes that operate all day and serve a variety of trip purposes. Workforce has also been a top priority for us and is key to the implementation of this plan. This plan requires a significant expansion in workforce in order to be able to implement it. And like many companies, we saw significant hiring crunches during and immediately after the pandemic. I think that we have been able to, with some changes with our union agreements, some other changes, I think we've turned the corner on the workforce shortage. And then finally, Metro Transit is growing, and so we needed to make sure that we had a plan to coordinate how we're going about this. There's a new regional sales tax that took effect in fall of 2023. Also, we have 4 transitway projects under construction at the same time. Right now, 3 of which are poised to open in 2025. Up until this point, we've really not ever had more than one major construction project, capital project at a time in the pipeline. So definitely a lot going on, as well as a new mode of transit for us, microtransit. So Network Now represents a short-term vision for us with 2 goals. First is to resolve the status of routes that are currently suspended. Most of these are commuter-oriented routes, and almost all of these routes are supported by park and ride facilities. And so in addition to needing to determine whether we're going to restore the service, we also then need to determine what happens with the facility. Then on the other side, on the more optimistic side of things, it's also an opportunity for us to improve, have new routes as well as redesign existing bus routes, make frequency and span improvements on existing service, as well as prepare for the opening of new metro lines, so bus rapid transit and light rail lines, as well as Metro Micro, which is our micro transit on-demand service. So as I mentioned, it is a short-term plan. This vision is just through the end of 2027. The proposed plan allows us to expand service in the region by more than 35%. It's in terms of service hours that we provide, as well as improve the coverage and the mobility improve coverage and mobility in the region, both by expanding our traditional fixed route network as well as Metro Micro service. And also it's an opportunity for us to redesign our commuter and express routes in order to meet the travel needs of the region that we're seeing today. There are 3 pillars to this network reset that we've been following, and these are all summarized in the report that's available on the Metro Transit website that was issued about a year ago called Establishing the Foundation. That includes performance, policy, including the Council's transportation, the Metropolitan Council's transportation policy plan, and engagement. This project started last year with significant public engagement. We got over 6,000 comments through surveys and community workshops and a whole variety of ways to reach out to find out what are the transit values of the community and what are the priorities that we need to keep in mind. This chart that on the bottom right of the slide is from the report, and just I think is a good illustration of one of the changes that we have seen since the pandemic to travel patterns in the region. The x-axis represents hour of the day, so this is for altogether, this is one typical weekday from midnight to 3 a.m. the following morning. The y-axis is hourly boardings. The gray line is boarding activity by hour prior to the pandemic, so back in 2019. And as you can see, we had pretty good significant spikes both between roughly 6 and 9 o'clock in the morning, and then again between 3 and 6 o'clock in the evening, otherwise known as rush hour. The black line is what we're seeing today in terms of our activity, and there's really 2 main takeaways. Number one, ridership overall is still down compared to where it had been. But in particular, in the morning peak, we don't have nearly the AM peak period that we used to have. Instead, we're seeing more of a gentle ramp up throughout the course of the day. We are also seeing not nearly as much of a difference between ridership in the midday and during the rush hours. So all of the data from the Establishing the Foundation report, the trends that we've observed, and the public feedback that we received resulted in us coming up with 5 guiding principles that have really been the foundation of our draft concept plan. These include adapting service to changes in the market, preparing for new metro lines, maintaining the reliability of our service, building on success to grow ridership, and at the same time providing access to opportunities and services with a focus on advancing equity, reducing regional disparities. So a few slides at the regional level of the impacts of the concept plan, and then Steve will talk about Lake Elmo itself. So certain the results that, based on what's proposed in the plan, include growing ridership is one of those key principles. There are more than 60 routes that where we are proposing to improve either frequency or span of service. And those are all the blue routes that are shown on the map. That includes 15 routes that will have service that runs every 15 minutes or better, which we call our high-frequency network. And then also increasing frequency, or restoring frequency, I guess I should say, on both our blue line and our green line, the 2 light rail transit lines, back to 10 minutes, which is where they were at prior to the pandemic. Also results in additional service coverage, including 8 new micro zones So those are the green circles that you see on the map, and we'll get more on that in just a little bit. Also, we have more than 20 routes that either are new routes or are extensions of existing routes serving new areas, so that's the orange lines that you see on the map. And altogether, this results in approximately a 25% increase in the number of jobs that are accessible using transit within a 45-minute ride for the average resident in the region. And focus a little bit on our commuter-oriented express service. So as I mentioned, one of the guiding principles is adapting service to travel patterns. And we have seen the commuter express market, it represents the area where we have seen the most significant change in ridership and patterns. So as I talked about on that chart a couple of slides ago, of course, we're not seeing nearly the same ridership activity overall, but especially in the AM rush hour, as we were seeing back in 2019. Lower ridership demand on express routes overall, and a significant decline in park and ride use around the region. In 2019, we had over 18,000 vehicles a day that were parking at park and ride in the region. We did a count in early October. That number was down to about 4,500. So you can see really the significant change that we're experiencing in the downtown office worker, traditional 9-to-5 express rider market. We are, in addition to not seeing just the, most of this is the impacts of telecommuting for those who are able to do so, at least in some form, maybe as a hybrid in some days of the week, but not all days of the week. I think most of us would agree that the days of people, of office workers going into downtown Minneapolis or St. Paul 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, are probably behind us. We're seeing, certainly a lot of companies are calling employees back for a couple of days a week, but not generally seeing 5 days a week. We see a significant difference between our ridership, whether it's a Monday versus a Tuesday versus a Wednesday, that we didn't used to see. And also with the other thing that we've seen is a lot of the reason that people were choosing to use express service is because they didn't want to pay to park in downtown. Well, with the decrease in demand, of course, parking rates have also decreased as they're trying to get people back. And it's one thing to say, oh, I'm not paying to park 5 days a week, but now, well, I only go downtown 2 days a week. Okay. So we're seeing really the effects of all of that. So this is our opportunity to shift our strategy for how we serve the commuter and express network to something that we're calling the Key Express Network. So that's the purple lines that you see on the map here. This is our opportunity to consolidate service in order to free up resources that we can then reinvest to meet travel patterns, travel needs that we're seeing elsewhere in the region. So the idea of the Key Express Network is that there are 7 routes, including Route 270, which is the express service from the Maplewood Mall Park and Ride, that will run every 15 minutes or better during the rush hour, as well as have midday service. And so the idea is that in some cases, we're asking commuters to drive a little farther to us, but if you do, then we'll make it worth your while in terms of quality level express service that you're able to depend on. So this Key Express network, when you pair it with our Metro network, which is the other different colored lines on the map, the orange line, the green line, light rail, blue line, the gold line, which you see from downtown St. Paul out to Woodbury, that opens in March. When you combine all of these together, you have a corridor. You have corridors that have a significant large park and ride and are anchored by a Key Express network route to be able to provide that service in some sort of a limited stop or fast capacity. The thin blue lines that you see in the background on the map are other existing express routes. Those are, for the most part, going to continue to operate, but we're not going to be investing in additional resources in that area. So they'll continue to have just a handful of trips in each direction. So that's our strategy for the Commuter Express network as we move forward. This map shows the change in commuter-oriented service. The heavy blue lines represent the express routes that are, the key express routes from the concept plan, as well as our metro lines. The thin red lines represent routes that are proposed to be officially discontinued. There are over 50 of those. You'll see there's a lot of red lines on the map. I'll also point out, though, that the red lines are pretty thin. The width of the line correlates to the amount of service that we provide. And so you can see that it's a lot of route numbers that are proposed to be discontinued, but most of these have a couple of, just have a handful of trips a day that are on them. And then my last slide before I turn it over to Steve. This is also a slide from the report. We did a lot of analysis for what are expected outcomes if we implement the concept plan that is being proposed. This is just one of the examples of different types of analysis for expected outcomes. This particular slide is for the number of residents that live within a 5-minute walk or roll to high-frequency service, so every 15 minutes or better. The top third refers to everyone in our service area. In the middle is specifically looking at communities of color. And then the bottom is looking at low-income communities. The x-axis is the number of people, and then the y, the 3 different bars. The red bar is always our concept plan, our proposal. The middle bar is what we have currently, and the bottom bar in each of those 3 is back in 2019. So as you can see, the number of people who have access to high-frequency service in all of these different scenarios increases under the concept plan as compared to where we are at today and also where we were at back in 2019.
Hey, good evening. My name is Steve Basin, and in addition to my manager, Cindy Harper, with us tonight, we also have Metropolitan Council Member Gail Cedarberg sitting in the back row. So, yep. So as far as Lake Elmo and the concept plan, we'll just jump right into it. So right now we're showing Route 221. This is a proposed new route. It does not directly serve more of the heart of Lake Elmo, but it's proposed to end around the border between Oakdale and Lake Elmo along Highway 5, over where Target, McDonald's, and a Health Partners clinic is located. So this route is proposed to replace the current Route 219 service along Hadley Avenue. The difference being that this service would be extended north of 10th Street, continuing along Hadley Avenue up until 34th Street, Highway 5, and then the ultimate destination around that mixed use or commercial development in the northern part of Oakdale next to the Lake Elmo border. Service is proposed to operate every 30 minutes during the weekday, every 60 minutes after 8 p.m., and then every 60 minutes again on Saturday, mimicking exactly what is happening on Route 219 today. And then we don't have Sunday service. Similarly, just like we don't have Sunday service on Route 219 today. So the next slide is about Route 294. Now this route currently operates today, but the proposal is to restructure the existing service into a new route called Route 291. This would continue to be a commuter express route. The difference being the 294 today operates within Lake Elmo. The 291 would no longer operate within Lake Elmo as a result, due to basically a combination of factors. Lower ridership than what we have from pre-pandemic and what we are seeing in a more, I guess, COVID era, and the opportunity to really leverage the recent investments that will be occurring in March of 2025 with the opening of the Gold Line between Woodbury and downtown St. Paul. So what we have on the slide is the average number of daily riders on weekdays for Route 294. Pre-pandemic, we had six riders that were boarding within the city limits of Lake Elmo on Route 294. That number has now dropped to essentially 0, average number of boardings, riders within the city limit of Lake Elmo on Route 294. As a result, we've also reduced the service on Route 294. Prior to the pandemic, we operated about 6 trips in each direction during the peak period. And as a result of what Cindy had talked about With that reduction of demand and travel patterns that have changed, we then reduce the level of service on the 294 to one trip in each direction. So one trip in the morning, one trip in the afternoon. The alternative service, like I mentioned, we have 2 new park and rides that are going to be built, or that have been built and will be opening in March. One at Sunray Shopping Center, just behind the shopping center at Sunray Transit Center, the Sunray Park and Ride. And another park and ride will be opening at the Elmo Avenue station in Oakdale. So if there are riders that are within this area, they can still access all-day service every 10 minutes. Bi-directional service, meaning to and from downtown St. Paul all throughout the day and on weekends between this area in the East Metro and downtown St. Paul. And then the green circles, the kind of green fuzzy circles on one of the previous maps showed our new micro-transit zones. One is going to be opening early next year in January, serving the Lake Elmo, Oakdale, Woodbury area. We're actually calling it the Woodbury Area Zone. And microtransit is this on-demand shared ride service. Sometimes it's referred to as Uber with a bus. We currently operate service in North Minneapolis from about 5:30 in the morning to 10:30 at night, and that's on weekdays and I think on weekends. I think we may have a slide on that. Rides can be booked through app or by calling our service center. And let's see, I think there's a, yep, so more information on microtransit. The objective here is to complement the existing fixed route service, but not compete with the existing fixed route service, like Route 219, which is out there today, Route 323, and the upcoming Gold Line. Most of these microtransit services that are being proposed within network now are centered around these metro stations or transit centers, trying to provide service to areas that are typically difficult to serve with fixed route transit. And instead, we are trying to still provide access to the rest of the transit system by adding these micro-transit zones to access residents and businesses within the corridor of these transitways. So this map shows the micro-transit zone for the Woodbury area. And this map actually shows a previous zone which, since this publication, we have worked with staff from Washington County, Woodbury, Lake Elmo, and Oakdale, and we've actually extended the border to include more of Oakdale on the north side of 94 between Hadley Avenue, Elmo Avenue, and 10th Street. So, yep, this one will be opening in January of 2025, and then we're roughly hoping to open 2 additional micro-transit zones per year up through the end of 2027 as proposed in the network now. So this map, this slide shows the new updated zone, showing that kind of appendage that's been extended a little bit further north in Oakdale. And 4 additional stations along the Gold Line will be served by the Woodbury area microtransit zone. 13 square miles using 5 vehicles, and that's really what we wanted to start with to try to maximize our investment and see what the return was before we start making any adjustments to the zone. So this is what is going to be implemented come January, and as we worked with Jason and other city staff, we'll see how the zone and the public react to this, and then we'll adjust accordingly. So yeah, in the regular fare is $2.50 during the non-peak periods, and then $3.25 during the rush hour. Transfers will be accepted for free for the first 2.5 hours to and from this microtransit service. And then as far as next steps, the timeline for this project, we actually started this back in 2022 with significant engagement into 2023. We released the plan in September of 2024 for public comment, and that's the period that we are in right now. We are accepting public comments through the end of next week, November 15th. And during this time, we're also meeting with folks like you to talk about the plan, receive feedback, And before we start evaluating changes to the plan, then we release a final plan in late winter, early spring of 2025. So that's it. We're happy to take any questions.
One question, the one that runs from, the route that you're adding that goes down,
Hadley?
yeah, from eastern Oakdale.
Yep.
Is there a park and ride in that location, or what kind of, that one there?
Yep, the southern end of the route will serve the Harley Davidson and Landfall,
Yeah.
or,
Is there gonna be then a gold line stop there?
Yep, there's
So
a-
you could
there's-
hook up to the gold line through that?
yep, there's a station at Greenway Avenue,
Okay.
which is just at the south end of
And then at
the route.
the north end, is there some place for people to park and then take the bus?
No, along the route there isn't a park and ride.
Well, not at the terminus at the north side.
No,
Not at this point. Generally speaking, for all-day local service, that's not the type of market that attracts people who are gonna drive and park and ride. Usually park and riders are more interested in going to someplace where they have express service.
Sure.
And so it's a different market. It's not really, in this area, this is, if you have the ability to drive a vehicle and leave it, the idea is that you're probably not doing that if you're just going to another suburban destination.
You currently have an express bus that leaves by the Guardian Angels? by
We
Best
used to.
Buy? Is that gone now because
That
the
route's
gold
been-
line's gonna be open?
that route has been suspended since March of 2020.
Okay, all right.
Yep. And we recently closed that park and ride.
And then the gold line would ostensibly replace that, right?
Well, that's a different market. The 375 went between Oakdale and downtown Minneapolis.
Yeah.
Gold Line goes between the east metro suburbs and downtown St. Paul.
Right.
But we still have Route 355, sorry, go ahead.
Right, yeah, exactly, thank you. With the Gold Line opening, we have a shift in park and ride demand, I think, around. And so the reason we had Guardian Angels initially was because the Woodbury Theater park and ride was full, and so we needed extra capacity. Now, with the extra Gold Line park and rides that are being built, we're expecting to see some folks shifting around, and so didn't need to keep the overflow that was what the Route 375 provided.
We had about 550 spaces of available parking capacity at Woodbury Theater that was reaching capacity prior to the pandemic, which it was actually back in 2006, 2007, which necessitated the opening of the Guardian Angels Park and Ride. Since the pandemic, the usage at Woodbury Theater has dropped from about 490 to 500 to about 130. So we have that available capacity there to absorb more riders coming from these eastern areas, western Wisconsin, to Route 355 for direct express service to downtown Minneapolis.
Got it. Thank you. Other questions?
No.
Thank you very much for your time and presentation.
All right, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Next on the agenda is the consent agenda. I'll read through that really quickly. And then it's item F. Number 2 is approved payment of disbursements. Number 3 is approved liquor license renewals. Number 4, approve massage therapy license renewals. Number 5, accept donation to the fire department, resolution 2024-113. Number 6, approve Lake Demontreville Olson Lake Association grant. Number 7, approve Lake Jane Lake Association grant. Number 8, approve Inwood 5th edition landscape security release. Number 9, approve bulk water meter purchase. Number 10, approve disposal of city equipment. Number 11, approve paid on-call firefighter job offers. Number 12, approve date for city administrator probationary review. Number 13, approve compensation plan. Number 14, approve public service recognition event. Number 15 is approve public works operator hire. Number 16, approve release of warranty security for legacy at Northstar First Edition. Number 17 is accept improvements and approve pay request number 1 for the 2024 striping project. Number 18 is accept improvements and approve pay request number 9 for Torre Pine Street and utility improvements. Number 19 is accept improvements and approve pay request number 12 for Whistling Valley Street and utility improvement. With that, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as read.
So moved.
Support.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Consent agenda is hereby approved. Thank you. Getting on to our regular agenda. Item number 20, Lake Elmo Elementary. It's a CUP variance and preliminary plat, resolution 2024-114, 2024-115, 2024-116. And Mr. Nathan First will be presenting.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. So this item, Lake Elmo Elementary, has three different entitlement requests associated with it. Those are, as mentioned, the major subdivision, which is the preliminary plat part for this development. Two different variances we'll discuss, and a conditional use permit for the establishment of a new public school. I think we're all somewhat familiar with that location of that site that was on the former slide. What is being proposed, just in summary, so that we're all on the same page. We have a site that's just over 47 acres with a building proposed of just under 150,000 square feet. That would serve 1,100 students and have 130 staff. There is a separate access. There are two access points. There is a separate access for buses. There is stormwater ponding provided on site, and a connection proposed to the city's sewer and water system. And lastly, there are emergency access. They're meeting emergency access requirements through the two access points and then a road or path surrounding the school. So in terms of the land use, the city council did approve a comprehensive plan and rezoning last spring. So this project is now consistent with the city's established land use policies, future land use map, and the zoning district. As mentioned, those entitlements are what are required at this stage to allow for the school district to move forward with their new elementary school. So talk about those here really quickly. The major subdivision, that plat, that's required consistent with the city's development requirements. And really the purpose is to allow for the dedication that's required for right-of-way along these two county roads. Those are Lake Elmo Avenue North and 10th Street North. We're also getting drainage and utility easements dedicated on the plat to serve for stormwater management. And lastly, a good, clean legal description. With the variance, the first variance is to the lot or the parcel size maximum. The city has a 20-acre parcel area maximum for public facilities district uses. As this parcel is over 20 acres, it does need a variance. So that is precipitated the request. And there are findings that staff have in the staff report, and we'll talk about in this presentation to support approval of that. There is also a variance required to the 100-foot buffer that's established from residential uses. In this case, we have one drive that is less than 150 feet at about 38 feet from the property boundary. So therefore, a variance is needed as well. So the conditional use permit review, we've looked at a lot of the different elements of this site. This was a relatively complicated review, and so I will spend a little bit of time talking about some of these things. We looked at the bulk standards for the zoning district. We looked at, in this case, there is a shooting range buffer from Minnesota statute. We looked at the design of the building and site, tree landscaping and preservation, grading, and then public infrastructure. So to start, the bulk standards for this site, things like lot area, setbacks, etc. This site is meeting all of the city's bulk requirements except for the lot area maximum for which the variance is requested. So, moving on to the shooting range and the impacts associated with that. As we have discussed previously, the state statute does have a Chapter 87A, which establishes protections for gun ranges, and so you can see the Oakdale Gun Club near this site. Just as a summary of the Shooting Range Protection Act, it was a law established in 2005. As mentioned, it does kind of establish protections for those shooting ranges in the state to continue operation. So the impacts on this project were that we had to understand if the school would establish any uses within the 750-foot buffer that would cause the gun club to become non-compliant with state standards. So as part of the due diligence and submittal for this project, the school district had a consultant provide a noise study, do testing on the site, and do some analysis to determine whether or not that any noise levels on this site would be above the allowed threshold. The study came back positive in the sense that there are not impacts that are, or the shooting range decibels aren't above the state allowed threshold. So in other words, the school district can establish a use within the buffer established from the gun club. We did also have the noise study amended to include information on fall conditions because the measurements were in summer. In the fall, we have slightly different usage of the gun club. We have leaf off conditions, and again, at that time, the study came back to show us that the sound levels are below the maximum threshold. So moving on to the site and the building. The design of the building, we've got some architects here on behalf of the school district, so I'll let them speak to some of the influences here on the actual design. But looking at the building materials and the quality of materials that are required by the city's policies, this building does meet those requirements. So I wanted to spend a little bit more time, though, talking about tree mitigation. This was a pretty big part of the Planning Commission's discussion about this project. And I just want to start by saying there are a lot of factors that have influenced the tree removals for this property. First and foremost, where that building is located is, obviously influenced by things like setbacks, in this case, the buffer from the gun club, and also requirements for the location of access points. So we have requirements from the county to locate accesses a certain distance from intersections. We also have requirements for this site to park, have enough parking on site to support the use, in addition to having queuing for those pickups, serving the site, not spill out onto the county road. So again, that does require more of the property to be utilized. The other thing here is stormwater ponding. I want to note that this site is managing its stormwater, and so that does come with grading impacts. The city has also communicated a requirement for the school district on this site to plan for stormwater impacts of future intersection improvements. That's a really big benefit to the city to have stormwater ponds account for those future improvements, because that is something the city will not have to pay for in the future. So that is a big benefit and something that's being accounted for with this project, and it does increase the number of tree removals required. So those are some of the factors that went into the tree removals. And on the screen, you can see the tree removal, the figure that was provided demonstrating all of those different trees that are being removed. You'll note that there is a significant number of trees on the site, and a lot of them are planted really close together. Those are a lot of the pine trees that you see being removed. The school district has requested an exception on the basis that the former property owner did plant a lot of the trees that are on site that are being removed. So the city code does have a process for exceptions. Really, the idea is that some sites in the city do have really heavily forested areas, and so there should be a process to provide relief in certain cases. There are some criteria that are established by the city code, which this site does appear to meet. It meets those 3 criteria, and we can talk about those if you would like to get into the details there. To keep us moving, just as a little bit of background, we just wanted to dig into some historic aerials to understand the timing of the trees being planted on the site. So going back to 1964, you'll see most of the trees on this site were not present. was mostly farm field. The same condition continued up until the early 1990s. This aerial is from 1991, submitted by the applicant. And then you can see between 1991 and 2003, that is when the vast majority of the trees were planted on this site. And continuing up to current day, where you have the trees that have grown now into significant trees. So this is a little bit complicated, so I'll spend a little bit of time working through it. The city's ordinance has a kind of step-by-step process where it establishes how we calculate how many trees have to be replanted after a certain number are removed. So when we're looking at the case without the exception, we've got just under 30,000 caliper inches of trees on site. The applicant is allowed to remove up to 30% of those without any mitigation. So when we do the math, we get a required mitigation of just under 15,000 caliper inches. And so there is, if we use the city's number for what we know a tree costs per caliper inch, just at that 14,600 number, we get to just under $5 million of mitigation. Now, the city code does have a replacement ratio for, depending on the type of trees you remove. Since the vast majority of removals on this site were evergreen, we would use that replacement rate for evergreens. That's at half. So if we look at, if the school district were to replant all of the trees, they'd be looking at just over 7,000 caliper inches that they have to replant. And when we apply the city standard evergreen planting, we come out to 2,437 trees required. That's a lot of trees. And a cash in lieu associated with that number of trees would be just over 2 million. When we look at mitigation with the exception granted, we do the same step-by-step process for calculation. We end up getting a required mitigation of 362 caliper inches, or approximately 121 6-foot-tall evergreens, and that equates to just over $100,000 for cash in lieu. So this brings me to the staff recommendation for tree mitigation. So one of the first things is, and this has been done in the calculation, is not to apply any credit for saved owner-planted trees. The next recommendation that's in the staff report and recommended conditions for approval is to effectively require a cash in lieu fee of $50,000. And lastly, there are some additional tree plantings that could take place on the site. There is one area in the landscape architect's memo in the north area where more trees are going to be required. But I did want to, so those are the staff recommendations for requirements for the city. I did want to provide some other ideas. We've worked with the school district throughout this whole process to try and understand all the different constraints on the site. And I just want to provide some options that the city council could consider if it wants to kind of increase basically the mitigation requirements. First, the city could consider increasing the cash in lieu fee on the school district. The second idea is to require more tree plantings within the irrigated area of the site. That would mean that those trees are going to survive the warranty period and we can actually require them to be planted, or to make some accommodations for trees that are planted outside of the irrigated area. And lastly, the city could consider also just working with the school district to allow some type of voluntary tree plantings. Maybe we don't care as much about ensuring every single tree lasts through the warranty period as we usually do. You could consider having smaller trees planted that may have a higher likelihood of survival if not irrigated. So there are some ideas that the city could explore to increase the number of trees replanted on the site, but there is a challenge of requiring tree plantings in an area that's not irrigated. It's difficult to
Just since we're just talking about it quick, do you have an image of where the irrigated area would be?
I do. So it's on this slide for landscaping. The irrigated area is the hatched line that surrounds the site, the improvements on the site. So you can see the irrigated area is pretty tight to the site improvements, really to limit the area that they're ultimately irrigating. I should also mention that in discussing this more with the school district, we've learned that the plan for this site is consistent with their policy for elementary schools, which is that they'll have irrigation initially through the 2-year warranty period, and then they will actually plan to abandon that irrigation in the long term after that warranty period is over. That, I understand, is consistent with their policy for elementary schools and not irrigating things like ball fields and other areas of the site. Okay, so,
Hold on, Councilmember Holtz.
So to clarify on that one, is the irrigation for those first couple of years, is there plan to use the stormwater?
there is not a plan to use stormwater at this time. That is not an official city requirement. Understand that a lot of developments have done that either through PUDs or other means. In this case, stormwater reuse would be difficult because we have infiltration basins on the site again, as we've discussed previously.
Thank you.
So I'm gonna go back to the tree mitigation slide, and I'll continue talking about landscaping here, and you can all feel free to jump in if there are questions. So to discuss landscaping, so there will be a lot of trees removed, as mentioned. There will be 253 trees replanted on the site. So you will see the trees that look generally just like the site plan here that's been shown on the screen. You'll see trees around the drives, around the parking lot, and the building and other ball fields. So in terms of landscaping, staff recommendations, there was a landscape architect comment that we're recommending that you work into the conditional approval for greater screening along the northern property boundary. Again, there's a minimum of 253 tree plantings required. And then lastly, there are some other minor things in the LA memo. Really quickly, parking. This site does meet the city's parking requirements. There are 3 stalls required per classroom. This site is technically over-parked. They're providing more parking than they actually need. Okay, in terms of the next sort of important area of the site plan review, that was the public infrastructure and specifically transportation improvements. So this was, this process has also included Washington County. We've met twice monthly with the school district and the county to work through some of these challenges. So Washington County has provided comments that have been mostly worked into the site plan. Turn lanes are required for both access points. Queuing on county roads will not be permitted. A traffic light or roundabout is going to be required at the entrance for the school on 10th Street. This would be at the school district's cost. For the bus entrance on Lake Elmo Avenue could be restricted to 3/4 access, although I will note at this time it is not restricted. The county does prefer just 1 over 2 access points, but understands the need for and desire for 2 access points and would be okay with that. And then the last thing is that they did recommend consideration of safe walking routes and connectivity for the site.
I'm sorry, could you go back? The,
Yep.
the 3/4 access, could you help me understand what that is?
Oh, for sure. So the access we're talking about is that school bus access on Lake Elmo Avenue, and the idea was to restrict left-out movements going to the north.
Got it.
So
And then just one quick question here too. So with where the buses come in, is it intended that the buses can almost do like a roundabout in that kind of
Yeah.
area in the central area, or is there supposed to be a connector
That's a good observation. The buses will be able to turn around within that sort of bulb area.
and come back
Yep.
out where they come in?
Yep.
Okay.
So they're actually separated by curbs, and you can't circulate through. The school district may correct me if I'm wrong on that. I don't know all their operations.
Okay.
Councilmember Holtz?
And then question, so the county did put into their CIP down the road for the roundabout, and some of the tree plantings we have are in that the landscaping plan has in that southeast corner. Are some of those tree plantings in the way of where a future roundabout would go?
Let's go back to the landscape plan. So I think you could be right. There may be some tree plantings if there are significant changes to the location of intersection improvements. It might be that some of those plantings would be removed. I'm not quite sure at this time.
I mean, because hypothetically, if the county were to be spitballing and say, yeah, that, obviously where that 45 is, in 2 years they'd get thrown out, I would just say, let's just relocate them now as part of the plan instead of wasting 6 trees right there, would be my thought, but thank you.
On the side, actually, one more question. So the minimum of 253 tree plantings required with mitigation, is that in addition to the 362 trees that we were talking about, like if we offer that exception?
That's a good question. So, what I think you're asking is, do the landscaping requirements in the city code
Yes.
count for tree mitigation?
Correct.
In this case, they do.
Okay,
So this would work towards that.
so there still would be an
Number.
additional, if we went with a 362, an additional 90 trees that should go on the site.
Yeah, so if the city wanted to make that requirement, that would be the math.
Okay, or 110. Okay.
So I'm gonna continue moving along here with traffic and transportation improvements. So we've talked about Washington County's comments. The city also obviously has comments on this, and so the city engineer memo includes a number of requirements, again, that have been contemplated mostly by the site plan. Access, so the accesses have to be approved in locations that are approved by the county. There are turn lane improvements right and left required for those access points to the county standard. We have intersection control improvements, as mentioned, that are at the school district's cost. The main entrance at 10th Street North and that entrance onto Lake Elmo Avenue. There is also a need to have a temporary wood pole stoplight at the intersection of the county roads. That would be replacing what you have currently, the four-way stop. That would also be at the school district's cost, and then would be replaced in the future by that improvement programmed by the county. We have a need for emergency service access that is currently met by this proposal. And then lastly, we have a requirement for bituminous trails along both county road corridors, and then connectivity from those trails actually into the site. And one of the suggested improvements to this site plan that's been, I believe, incorporated in some of the latest versions is connectivity through a pedestrian trail that kind of gets the people coming north from Lake Elmo Avenue. So I won't go through all of these comments, but we have gotten memos from the fire department, city engineer, the city's landscape architect, in addition to Washington County and Valley Branch. Now to get into the findings for these things. In terms of the lot area variance, given the number of required improvements, it just didn't make sense to split this property up. And so staff would support the findings for a variance on the basis that we've got some unique circumstances on this property, some intersection spacing standards, et cetera. For the buffer, again, given the requirement to space the drive a certain distance from that county road intersection, that's really driving the need for that buffer variance. In terms of the subdivision, the project does not meet any of the findings for denial in the city code. And then lastly, the conditional use permit, we have a number of findings required for CUPs that also can be, findings can be made to support that as well. Lastly, public comments. So a public hearing was held at the Planning Commission on October 16th. We had a number of residents provide public testimony. There were 3. Their concern was about the primary concern seemed to be the amount of tree removal. There was opposition to the exception request, in addition to concern for other things like traffic and lights. We also did get a comment from the one abutting property owner with similar sentiments. We've got in the resolutions for this item 22 conditions for approval. Those are broken out by things that are somewhat standard and then unique to this project. Those 12 more or less standard conditions really require conformance with the city review memos. The city attorney's plat opinion and development agreement are required. Fees, permits, etc. In terms of the infrastructure improvements, some of the highlights from those 7 conditions, there's no queuing allowed on the county roads. Intersection improvements are at the school district's cost, and a waiver agreement will be required to ensure that the city can work between the school and the county to make sure those costs are accounted for. Trail connections are required in addition to construction of those turn lanes. And then lastly, the $50,000 cash in lieu fee of mitigation is recommended in addition to additional review for any removals in the buffer areas for this site. Lastly, ensuring that in the long term, we have the ability to enforce state statute, that Chapter 87A. We want to make sure that we review any new or intensified land use in that buffer. So those are the conditions that staff are recommending. We can discuss them in more detail if you would like, or if you have questions. I do have 3 recommended motions here. One resolution for the variances, another resolution for the preliminary plat, and a 3rd resolution for the conditional use permit. I'll mention that the school district and their team is here and happy to address questions that you may have or talk about their project, so.
Okay, were there anybody that wanted to speak on this one?
Just one.
All right. At this time, prior to the applicant talking, we do have a resident that requests to speak on this item. So when I call your name, please come to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and we'll have 6 minutes to talk. There's, if you have questions, they will not be answered during that time. However, we will direct staff to make sure that answers are made available to you. Ben Johnson.
Thank you, City Council. Please pardon me. I've been getting over a chest cold. Ben Johnson, 10841 10th Street North. I'll keep this quick. As you know, the city planner has done a great job kind of hearing our comments, and so I just following along with the other things, like we're talking about removing 79% of the trees on that property. So that's, you know, cutting down 2,000 trees and planting 250. That just seems like a kind of staggering ratio to me. And I think, like, I don't care about the money. I feel like that's just a token thing. Like, if you care about the environment, like, to me, that's what's important. And so I definitely think that I'd like to see a bigger commitment from the school to just plant more trees and come to some compromise with the city as far as, you know, the money side, but I would definitely focus on the actual trees. My second thing is on screening along 10th Street. In the original, or one of the early versions of the plat, it showed like 4 or 5 rows of screening trees, which I think fits with the current natural buffer of the site. And in the latest design, it seems like there's a single row of trees and they're spaced 50 feet apart, and that doesn't provide a lot of buffer to the road. And then the last thing, in the comp plan, there is a quote that says, 10th Street is over capacity between the segment east of Inwood to Lake Elmo Avenue. And it just seems like this, if we're already over capacity, adding, you know, traffic control and just the increased traffic from the school is gonna be a problem. So as somebody that's like going to be very greatly affected by this, I just think council should take some of those things into consideration. But thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Okay, would the applicant like to speak at this time? Mr. Drummerhausen?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Mark Drummerhausen, Stillwater School District. I don't have a lot of comments here. I'm sure we'll have some discussion and questions here as we go along, but just want to reiterate how excited we are to continue our 100-year tradition to have elementary school here in Lake Elmo. That the site, just to reiterate, the reason the site is chosen where it was is because of the city ordinance to have a school off of a main highway or a main roadway. And 10th Street as well as Lake Elmo Avenue fit that. So looking at site options and the land required, that was one of the areas that made this site attractive to us because it fit that requirement and it hit 2 of those major roadways. Nathan talked a little bit about the design. The design of the building is around a prairie theme, and its connection adjacency to the Lake Elmo Park Reserve. You'll notice some of the outside features as well as some of the interior features really resonate that prairie theme in conjunction with the Lake Elmo Park Reserve. So we really wanted to bring out nature within this new building and new concept. So with that, I'll kind of leave it at that, and I'm sure we'll have some questions or discussion here as we go along.
All right, thank you, Mr. Drummerhausen. Oh, hold on. I guess Mr. Holtz already has a question.
And I may have missed it. What's the timeline for the temporary installation of, if this were to pass, for the temporary installation of stoplights on the poles?
So we would have temporary stoplights starting when we open. They'll be in service by the time we open first day, which would be fall of '26. And I believe the county in their 2028 plan, it has the improvement coming from a county perspective. So we'd be looking at temp poles for roughly 2 years, depending on when that actually takes place.
And would that be the only change at that time? There wouldn't, or would there already have been the potential three-quarter out on the north side for the buses? There would already have been additional turn lanes at the intersection, or would that be the
All the
next
improvements
phase?
will be,
There'll be no three-quarter turnout, and then currently it's anticipated from 2028 to 2029 is when the county roadway improvements would go in. At this time, there's not a full scope of the roadway improvements line, but they have coordinated with us essentially what they would need at the,
I'm gonna, when you speak, I'm just gonna ask you to come to the podium, because we're televising this, and I don't know if people that are watching can really hear you from there. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mitch Hanso with Larson Engineering. I'm the civil engineer on the project. Do you want to reiterate your question?
Well, so Cliff notes, essentially the changes to the roadway itself would not be anticipated until the CIP improvements for the county in 2028.
There would be improvements to the intersection of 10th and 17th. They would expand the current lanes, so there would be dedicated right and left-hand turn lanes at 10th Street
By the time school opens?
by the time school opens.
Okay.
For the temporary intersection, they would come back with the county improvements and revise it even further in the future.
All right, that's what I was, thank you.
Thanks. Yes, Councilmember Dragisich.
There's been a lot of talk about comments on the trees, which seems to generate a lot of concern. I assume that there's some flexibility in coming to a plan that would work for everybody on that?
Yep. And we've talked through options. We actually had a meeting this afternoon with Nathan and the city team about different options, you know, from our perspective, their perspective, that we've
Yeah.
talked about various options this afternoon.
I assume from your earlier presentation that you weren't locked in stone on it, but I just wanted to clarify it for the public's benefit.
Correct, yep.
Councilmember
Yeah.
Hearn?
So I guess I do want to kind of bring the tree conversation into this too, but with the noise study that was done, and with those numbers being, you know, relatively close to kind of the threshold limits, it's good to see that it's below it, but obviously just sitting right at that threshold. With the discussions that you guys had with the trees and possibly planting more, I mean, is that something where if there are more trees planted, that you'd expect further sound mitigation from what the study already found, if more trees were put more on the eastern side of this, or excuse me, yeah, on the western side of it? Would that be expected, that there would be further noise mitigation? You know, I don't know if that was,
To a certain
Considered.
extent, yes, but on the site, located on the western site, there's a large low area currently that acts as like a landlocked basin essentially. And the area is so low that it wouldn't necessarily provide additional mitigation for the sound coming. So in certain areas, yes, but not everywhere.
so that is, it's lower graded on that side as is, and there's no plan to grade that so it is a higher area on the northwestern corner or western?
With the watershed's rules, we need to maintain that low area. It's like a
Okay.
flood storage area, so you cannot revise grades in that area.
Got it, okay. I
Any
get,
other questions?
oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I guess maybe just to continue with that a little bit, I mean, I guess as far as with those noise levels, has there been any other conversations about what the school thinks that maybe could be done? Again, I know technically nothing does have to be done, but just again, with it being right at that threshold, is there further considerations of what maybe could be done to bring it down even further?
One of the options we talked about, but it doesn't fit. So if you kind of look at where the irrigation is on the map, you kind of look at the landscaping.
Yeah.
You know, from an elementary perspective, we typically don't landscape, or we don't irrigate our whole land. So to bring irrigation up to that northwest corner just for a 2-year period, financially just doesn't make sense. But we could plant more trees along that northwest corner there, you know, along where the gun range is on the west side and along the northern buffer there. If acceptable by the council, we could plant more trees without irrigation.
Okay.
Would be an option.
Okay.
Please do.
Hi, I'm Paul Apikowski with Wold Architects and Engineers. I appreciate the question about noise mitigation. I just want to point out that this is actually the reverse of most of the time when you would be considering noise problems in a city. This law from the state is really about not interfering with the gun club, and the district has always been comfortable with their location in proximity to the gun club. So meeting that threshold just means that we're in compliance with the state law. It might be nice to deaden sound more with trees, but it's not really the way it works with this one. It's actually the reverse.
Help me understand, it's the reverse of the gun range is not expected to have to deal with the noise from the school? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I guess that's part of it too. No, but the normally an ordinance on sound would be somebody's coming and developing something that's noisy, and you're trying to mitigate that sound so you're not interfering with the rest of the neighborhood. And this law from the state about gun clubs is really, it's the opposite of that. It's about not interfering with the gun club's operations by putting something there that would complain about the noise. In this case, the school district has always been comfortable with the fact that the gun club is there.
Sure.
And so I think from our perspective, there's probably not a need to do more mitigation than that ordinance or that state law would require.
Okay. Thank you. Maybe one more.
Go for
So you mentioned you had the conversations about the trees. I guess that would be just helpful to kind of understand, I guess, what did those conversations look like as far as other options for if we did want further trees and we wanted to kind of go above the 253 minimum?
Mayor and council, I'll just jump in from here. The slide that I presented, those other options were some of the things that we had talked about. So thanks, Mark. You're going to go up a couple more. Wrong direction. There we go. Thank you. So we did talk about some of the options. Of course, as mentioned, the cash and lieu fee is one of those things that the city can require, but it seems that there has been more focus on simply requiring more trees. And so if that were the case, the city could do a number of things. You could require more trees to be planted on site. We looked at, could we squeeze more trees in the irrigated area of the site? One of the challenges we're presented with in that case is when we get mature tree canopy, plantings that are really close together don't really end up turning into great long-term trees. I think there are definitely areas where there could be a little bit more tighter plantings, and maybe we look at some of those buffer areas that the community would like to prioritize as the area where you maybe squeeze more plantings, or plantings that are of certain species that can do better in those situations. But if you want a lot more trees, I think you probably end up looking at some type of requirement that doesn't necessitate irrigation, as mentioned, just because requiring irrigation would obviously be really, really cost prohibitive. If you were to get some type of voluntary tree plantings from the school district, that might be an option. I don't know if there's some type of fund programming that you could dream up that would do that in areas on the site. So looking at maybe some flexibility with having more trees planted in the non-irrigated area, that could be one of those things that the city considers.
Would there be safety concerns or engineering concerns with kind of the southern aspect of the lot, or just north of 10th Street? Kind of like Ben had brought up, would that be concerns with putting higher density trees there?
Yeah, there's definitely concerns, I would say, we would have to be very careful with. One of the things is we have stormwater basins in that area that we can't be putting trees in those areas, or sometimes even the easements that are around them. And so we have to be careful with tree plantings, and so that would require maybe a little bit more review to see how many more trees could be squeezed in and where for that. But I certainly think there's definitely a lot of space in the northwest corner of the site.
Councilmember Holtz.
And I guess that brings a light bulb for me as well. In terms of where the basins are planned right now, obviously it's because of the intersection and then the improvements that are gonna happen, no matter what, at some point, whether it's in 2040 or now in 2028, those are likely not flexible for location, correct? I mean, that they need to be obviously along 10th, they need to be along Lake Elmo. And the reason I ask is because, again, I completely understand that, you know, for the last 30 years, there has been trees developing and creating this privacy wall. But I assume literally a single row is pushing it.
Yes, so just with the easements regarding the basins, putting rows in at the front specifically would be kind of prohibitive. And there's little flexibility in the basins currently. We do have two of those lowland areas I had previously talked about on the site. One's in the northern, right in the center of the northern part of the site, and then the other's on the west side of the parking lot. Those cannot be moved essentially, and those are flood storage zones with the Valley Branch watershed.
Well, and so even with the basin that's going parallel to 10th on the south side of the parking lot, like the landscaping plan identifies a single row of trees on the southern side and then a single row that follows the road coming in. Is that a risk in your view, where maybe actually that row should be shifted to the north and just becomes maybe an every other to the north instead? Or is that a path that's sustainable? My focus is making sure that the trees have a path to success.
I think if the trees were allowed within the stormwater easement, they would have access, but there are alternate things we have to consider, like maintenance associated with the basin, access to the basin. They need like access all the way around the basin. Once we start planting trees in these areas, they start prohibiting some of those other items.
And I guess a question maybe for staff, this is another government entity. Would this be a city storm basin? Or would this be a county because of county roads? Or is this a school district basin that they provide maintenance on?
Councilmember Holtz, at this time in our write-up, we have the stormwater basins being owned and operated as a private facility, and have them executing a stormwater maintenance and easement agreement over it.
Gotcha. Just a curiosity, as we've had input recently about stormwater basins and whether, you know,
We're in the northwest corner.
unintended vegetation starts to grow in there, maybe it potentially causes harm to the plantings that you want to have there, because obviously there's a vested interest to have these plantings have success, which is kind of the intent of my questioning here.
That is correct.
All right, thank you.
Everybody good?
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Thank you. I'll entertain a motion.
One more question here
ahead,
for
sure.
Nathan. So Nathan, with one of the conditions of approval, so number 10, the requiring the applicant, cost participation of the applicant at no more than 50% of the city's costs, or 250,000, whichever is less. I guess when we added that, the caveat of or 250,000, whichever is less, again, I guess personally when I see that, I would prefer to just keep it at 50%. It's the first thing that comes to my head, but was there a reason behind that, kind of the cap being set for it?
Yeah, we wanted to try to set a cap that felt pretty reasonable, and so what we're referring to is a condition that it anticipates those future county intersection improvements that would take place again in 2027 or 28 or whenever that can be programmed. And so there is a cost share policy that I'm sure Jack can explain better than I can. My understanding is the city's share in this case would be primarily the stormwater ponding associated with the improvements of the intersection and any right-of-way acquisition. With this development, we're getting ponding anticipated and taken care of, so that's one of those cost drivers, and the other is that we're getting right-of-way dedicated from the school district. Again, so that we have, I think, now 3 of the 4 corners of that intersection accounted for. So this condition is intended to help the city, help reduce the city's costs of whatever those future improvements are. And then I'll look to Jack if I misstated anything.
Is there any estimates as far as on what we'd be looking at a price for an improvement like that?
There isn't, and that's what's, excuse me, that's what's difficult at this time is we barely have a concept from the county. So the county's kind of done a concept of what they think the improvement will look like. And then they've not done a cost estimate, so they just sort of grab a number and give you a big number. And then the cost participation by the city is not even easy. It's a county road, so the cost participation is much lower. If one of the legs is, or 2 of the legs is a city road, then the cost participation goes up. So it should be a low amount because it's all county road. Usually our cost participation is, the big components is right-of-way and stormwater. And we're addressing a good part of that through the conditions of approval here by having that integrated into the site plan. And then the other little things that, it's like we have to pay a certain portion of trail work. We have to pay a certain portion of curb and gutter, things like that. You have to go through line item by line item, which we don't even have the line items. So we kind of went high level with what the county's estimate was. We reached, I think, on a high level of what our cost participation might be, and then split it 50-50 kind of thing is how we arrived at the number.
In your discussions with the county, I'm assuming these 2 roadways are planned to remain rural?
Yes. But when you do the roundabout,
Yeah.
you'll use a lot of curb and gutter at that point.
On the inside.
On the
only, though.
insides and-
The outside's okay,
Yeah.
right?
Right. But again, those are design level details.
Right.
We just don't know yet, so.
It's still 3 years out. Yeah, Councilmember Holtz.
On the information, 4,000 pages into the packet, for the legend of recommended additional trails, obviously there's discussion for the trail to go north on Lake Elmo, but to a certain point then jutting straight east to eventually connect potentially to Royal. Is that still, it's figure 14 of page, 124. We don't necessarily have that as part of the conditions of approval at this time. Is that still waiting for the county's thoughts when they're doing these improvements in 2028 as to?
Yeah, so Councilmember Holtz, to help answer the question, the requirements for trails with this project that are recommended by staff are the improvements for trails on this property and not off of it. So, yep,
Oh, sorry.
that's all I was gonna say.
I assume I don't have our CIP memorized, but we don't have anything in our CIP about potential trail connection between Lake Elmo Ave and Royal.
Not at this time, we don't.
Okay.
So I think once a school is in place, then there are
Safe to school grants.
safe to school grants run through enhancement funding through the state transportation improvement plan, the TIP or STIP. And then it gets scored based on different factors and then can receive funding through that to accommodate, say, a trail going to the east.
Is the intent that we expect the district would take the lead on that, as these are trails for this purpose? Or was the level of participation that's needed for those, because obviously it's a county road there going to a city neighborhood
Yeah,
for
so
a school district?
I think it might depend on the funding as to which entity applies. I would imagine there's definitely coordination amongst both the city and school as to who, kind of who leads or who supports an application like that.
Gotcha. 'Cause
And I think Jack might have more to add on that.
I just think so far, the whole project's been pretty collaborative between the school district, the city, and the county, and I think the discussions around that, and it would probably continue to be a collaborative effort. The grants that the mayor talked about are available both on a planning level and a construction level, so you would first probably go for a planning grant to plan your safe routes to school. You have to have an adopted plan before you can apply for anything that's to construct trails.
Yeah.
So it would be a phased approach that way, and it would probably, I'm sure all 3 entities would be involved at some point. I don't know who would lead it.
Thank you.
I guess I do want to dig into the tree thing just a little more. On page 69 from the packet, or sorry, well, this one will actually, well, yeah, page 69 might work better because it shows where the trees are. Right, you know, you did have it actually on there too.
You're
The
looking for the
landscape
landscaping
plan.
plan? Okay,
Yeah.
let me show that, okay.
Yeah,
Oops, sorry.
last one. And I guess we will, maybe if we could kind of go back and forth between those two, because, so the last one where it shows the irrigated area, it goes to the west of the baseball fields. Is that, and again, maybe this is a question for the applicant in the school, but is that meant to be open field area, or is that just extra space outside of the outfields of the baseball fields? Because again, is that an area where further trees could go from a mitigation standpoint?
So I'll toggle back to the landscaping plan, and then, I don't know that I can answer the question beyond what we see, you know, proposed in the tree plantings and landscaping plan, and then what's available on the, irrigation schedule, but I will, I'll let the school district answer that.
Thank you.
So from an elementary perspective, we would not fence the outfield, I think if that's what you're getting at. So past the egg line of the infield, that would just be open fields.
Okay.
So in spring, summer, t-ball, you know, baseball, but then those fields would probably open up for soccer fields in the fall.
And so if we were looking at requiring more than the 250 trees and planting more, is that an area where trees could go? Because that is irrigated area, so that would be,
It could, we would probably want to do it outside of that. We would want to be able to fit a soccer field inside of that.
oh, I'm sorry, I see. I thought this was the whole field here. Got it. Okay. So then just further outside of that, is that where that basin begins then? So trees any further west of that is where we'd be, so outside the outfield?
Outside the outfield,
Yes.
that will all be native land. So that is where, if we wanted to plant additional trees, they could go on that northwestern corner.
Okay. We could plant trees there. Okay. And then I'm just trying to look with the topography. Were you saying that that is lower area?
So right in the center, that is the lower area, and then right west of the parking lot, there's a low area. And I believe with the watershed, since these are lowland areas and not a basin, trees can be planted in these areas because they won't be maintained by the school district.
Right.
But they wouldn't provide any type of screen, they would be so low that you wouldn't see the tree for sake. So the northwestern corner on the top is one of the higher sides of the site. So if you were to plant trees there, they would provide some sort of screening.
Sure.
All right. Okay, thank you.
I'll entertain a motion.
Move to adopt Resolution 2024-114, approving the variances requested for Lake Elmo Elementary as proposed by Stillwater Area Public Schools, ISD 834, with conditions and findings listed in the staff report.
Support.
So we have a motion and a second. We can have discussion. Councilmember Holt.
So this is just on the variances, so with the 20-acre aspect, I absolutely have no issue with this. The guidance from the state is this site should be over 20 acres anyway for a school of this size. I understand why we have the 20-acre rule in our city code. There are very good places where it applies. This is not one of them, and it meets the requirements for the variance, so I have no issue with that aspect.
Anything else? Yeah, I guess given that we gotta have, proper distance from intersections for access, we require 2 points of access, and, we need to meet certain requirements by the county. it takes up portions of that property where 20 acres wouldn't cut it anyway. So I'm in support of this. Call the question. All those in favor to adopt resolution 2024-114? Lost my train of thought.
All those in favor?
Thank you. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Move to adopt Resolution 2024-115, approving the preliminary plat requested for Lake Elmo Elementary as proposed by Stillwater Area Public Schools, ISD 834, with the conditions and findings listed in the staff report.
Support.
So we have a motion and a second. So is this one? This is not the one that involves it. I have a feeling the tree thing's gonna have some discussion though, so this one's not the one that deals with the trees.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, if
That's
you're
the
asking,
CUP.
yeah, if you're asking which approval you would apply tree-related conditions to, I think this preliminary plat one would be appropriate, given that
Okay.
we review this development sort of
Right.
through this.
So, this has been moved and seconded. I think that the trees on the corner, the southeast corner, need to be moved to the inside of the trail. For one, we do have intersections in our city where trees have grown and some sightlines become an issue. And anytime you can take that corner and keep the tree away from right at the corner, I'm a big fan of. And from the standpoint that likelihood, if it is a roundabout, and we all know Washington County likes roundabouts, they're a good tool in the toolbox for keeping traffic moving. That's another reason to remove them from the corner and put them the inside of the trail. I understand, as an ordinance, we require a trail on the new development, on the roadways there, that's gonna be in there. And unfortunately, those trails remove a lot of the trees that people have seen over the course of the years. So I understand the point of contention that brings, because the trees that you typically see, not the ones in the middle, will then be gone and replaced with a trail and some different trees that are planted in there. The one thing, that I'd like to discuss and something that, I've been ruminating about is, along with can you go back where you had the three, yeah, there we go. On the other options, one thing I think we could do is require trees to be planted in the non-irrigated area, because you don't want the trees in the irrigated area to be condensed. But I also, when you see all those trees that have been planted by the previous owner, he did not have irrigation out there. So I think the likelihood of trees surviving without irrigation, and even if they don't all survive, right? So I wanna get away from the 2-year obligation to the developer to make sure that X amount survive or X amount, but I'd like to have something in there, and I think the school could really actually create, I don't wanna tell the school means and methods, right? But something I've discussed is make an event out of it for the children that are gonna go to the school, or if families are there, or, have plant a tree, or have a, adopt a tree type thing where, make it a kind of a community thing where, they're building a new school for the kids, let the parents and the kids have some involvement and add something to it. My neighborhood, just off of Stillwater Boulevard, 17 years ago, there was some funding from the city of Lake Elmo from MnDOT, and our neighbors got out and planted the trees, and now you drive by and those trees are tall right now. So I think in that area, kind of on the northwest side, it would be, and again, I don't wanna boggle this down with a bunch of requirements as to that they have to survive 2 years, they gotta be irrigated or anything like that. I wanna try and do something that's of the positive mindset to add more trees to the area that's not gonna impact, you know, the ball fields and overcrowd areas that are irrigated. And maybe just get some feedback from you guys on that idea.
I'll jump in if that's okay. So I tend to agree with that as well. I guess maybe just a little clarification on the voluntary. So that is essentially saying, you know, we would like that if you would conduct a program like this versus the requirement where we're saying, hey, like, yeah, 362 trees are needed, but we are gonna be lenient with, we're not gonna have you warranty them for 3 years.
And maybe it's not even 362 trees. I mean,
But more than,
I don't
if
know
we
what
feel there
the-
should be more.
you know, what the reasonable amount is.
Sure.
You know,
How old is the current building? 101? Hold on, math is hard. 104. 104 trees. Extra.
I don't know, yeah.
Just an idea, if we're looking at number of trees, just think about size as well. If we required
Yeah.
104 2.5 caliper inch trees, that's a significant investment. If we require 104
I mean-
saplings, it's maybe a little bit less.
Yeah,
So-
something that people can handle, right, and plant reasonably. I've planted some pine trees with my parents at their place. You had to get a loader out there, right, and move them around. They were kind of big, but I'm not talking that kind of size. I'm thinking of some, you know, bag and burlap that's, I'm not an expert in that area, so I just have an idea.
So maybe this should have been a question, I suppose, is, you know, if we did take the cash in lieu of the trees, what is that used for? I mean, is that, we're using that for the emerald ash borer trees and we're saying we're gonna earmark it for that, or is it?
Create a tree fund that's specifically, like, when we had the workshop and we talked about trees, yeah?
Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt the conversation, but that would be the intent of the 50,000 would be to establish a tree replacement fund for the city. It'd be
Specifically for like
for-
emerald ash borer type stuff, or would it be for different situations?
I'll look to Marty for how he would prefer to use the funds, but they should be used on trees.
Okay.
Yes, Councilmember Jarvis.
I kind of like Mayor Cadenhead's suggestion. I think, that, you know, you get the seedlings from the DNR, because the school kids can plant them. They're small, they're easy, and they grow very well.
Yeah.
They don't require a lot of water, and these kids will come back for their high school reunion, they'll say, I remember when I planted that tree.
Yeah, or a group of trees
You know,
and,
it's, and it won't be prohibitive in terms of a cost. I think it's, what we were talking about before, working together to come up with something the community can support and that, you know, the city can support.
Councilmember Holtz.
I mean, this is, for all intents and purposes, replacing the community school, right? It is from 1920. So I originally liked the idea of the tree replacement fund, and I think it still should be something we need to consider, especially with maybe the franchise fees or whatever. I also really like this concept, because it's not the size of the single-room schoolhouse, but it is a community school. It doesn't represent all of Lake Elmo, but it is the community's school, and it's a pretty substantial investment on behalf of many of our residents and their children. So I like that idea, you know, a community get-together, whatever that may be. It might be multiple times. It might be phased over 4 years, right? But I think that would be a very positive thing. Our community is asking for those types of opportunities all the time.
I don't know if, can I ask the school district, is that something that would be, that you would entertain?
Yes, I mean, we obviously have a lot of details to flush out, but yes, that'd be
Right.
something we'd be interested in, yes.
Okay. All right, can we make that as part of the conditions of this motion?
Voluntary tree planting?
Mayor and council, just to clarify the conditions, we've got one condition that we're proposing to add here with those southwest corner trees being flipped to the other side of the trail.
Yeah.
To ensure they stay out of future improvement area.
Southeast.
Sorry, southeast, got that wrong in my notes. And then, the second additional condition would be to require some type of a plan for planting 104 saplings, basically, on the site in the northwest corner. of the property.
106, school open in 2026.
106.
Yeah, I think that's fair, and like Mr. Drummerhausen said, we can figure out the details, and I'm not looking to make this onerous or anything. I want this to be a good thing. I want it to recognize the residents' concern about the loss of trees. I want it to recognize that we are a tree city, and, you know, that's something I think that's important.
I would like to add that the very first tree be planted by the mayor.
Sure.
We'll see if it lives, right? Pressure's on.
All right. Anything else for this? Yes?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, is this something you want staff to rework the resolution and bring it back for approval on the consent agenda next time? And we do have some time here if you want to see it again, or is it okay as is?
I think it's okay as is.
Yeah.
And just to be clear, the, because I think the other discussion point for the 50% or the 250,000, that's gonna be in this next resolution.
Yeah, so to that question, all 22 conditions for approval were in every single resolution, just to make it abundantly clear of what the
Okay.
conditions were.
All those in favor of adopting resolution 2024-15 as discussed, please. What was that again?
I have no idea what you're trying.
Yeah.
Please signify by saying aye.
Yeah, why am I drawing a blank on it? Please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I,
Motion passes. Oh, my Lord. Excuse me.
Move to adopt a new parliamentarian. Move to adopt resolution 2024-116 approving the conditional use permit requested for Lake Elmo Elementary as proposed by Stillwater Area Public Schools, ISD 834, with the conditions and findings listed in the staff report.
support.
And then
We have a
discussion.
motion and a second discussion.
You know,
I'm
yes, I
curious.
mean, I guess I feel like that is one where I'd rather just keep it as 50%, if we're really quite unclear with what the costs are gonna be. Just from a liability of the city standpoint, and trying to be responsible for our taxpayers of Lake Elmo, I feel like keeping it at 50% rather than putting the caveat of, or 250,000, whichever is less, I just feel responsible to, hold it at 50%. Or am I thinking of this wrong?
I think you, I don't wanna say you're thinking about it wrong. I'm just saying the max amount we pay is 250,000, say it's 600,000, right? You pay 250.
Got it.
If it's gonna be under five, let's say it's 400,000, we're only gonna pay 250%.
Okay.
So
Yep.
I think the language is good as
Then
it
it's,
is.
okay.
If I'm
Let me-
understanding your concern.
Can you pull up the conditions again one more time, just so we can see that?
Yeah, so condition number 10 is the one you're referring to.
Yes.
Sorry, it's really small as I tried to fit a lot of conditions on this slide, so.
No more than 50%. Correct. Okay. So yes, I was thinking of that backwards. So no more than 50% of the city cost or
That's
250,000,
applicant cost.
whichever is less.
Well, I think you just no more than 50% of the city's cost. Oh, I see what you're saying now. I'm following what you're laying down.
Now you got me second guessing it.
No, I'm reading it now because it's the cost participation from the applicant.
Yes, at no more than, so that is the school.
Yep.
They'd either have to pay 50% or 250,000, whichever is less.
Yeah.
So if it turned out to be a million,
600,000, yeah,
they would pay 250 and we'd be stuck with 750.
right.
So if that is what we're seeing there, I would prefer to
Just leaving the no
Leave it.
more than 50.
no more than 50.
You had a statement?
Yeah, just two things. First of all, that 250 number was in there just because we had reason to believe that the cost would not exceed $500,000 for the city's share of the improvements. However, understanding that the council may want to move that direction, I do want to note to you that this condition, as all 22, were in all 3 resolutions, and so I would have to look to the city attorney as to how we would go back on the first 2 resolutions that have been approved with that condition in them.
So clarifying question, because there is a cost share policy with the county.
Yep.
How does this connect with what their policy is to begin with?
I'm gonna look to the city engineer to help explain the cost share policy.
When the project comes forward, they will present us with a total cost project, and then they will step through line item by line item their policy to determine what the city's costs are. And then at that time, we can look at what the 50% share is. And given that it's a county road intersection, the anticipation is that the city's cost share shouldn't be significant on this project.
Because we're already doing the right of way, we're already taking care of the storm.
Those are the
ponding.
larger concerns that we typically have.
It'll be things like a percentage of the pipe run from the curb and gutter or a place to deliver the water to the drainage area. There's a cost participation part and things like that.
Within the school, I mean, if it ends up being cheaper than what we're, you know, if we think it's gonna end up being less than $500,000, the school would still pay less than if we just stuck with 50%.
That wouldn't change.
Well, if it came in at 400,000, then the applicant would be responsible 200, we'd be responsible for 200.
Right.
So they would just, if it came in cheaper.
Yeah.
But if it goes higher, we'd be the ones that the city would be the one that ends up having to. So I guess it's just like, I just look at it as like a little bit of an insurance of if something is unexpected or if there is a different design.
So what would we have to do, council, on item number 10 with the prior made?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I think somebody would have to do a motion to reconsider the resolution. And then you would reconsider it, and then at that point, somebody would make a motion to amend and change that condition, vote on that amendment, and then vote on the resolution as amended.
Okay.
The first motion that we made tonight?
The first
The first two, okay.
Well, and the one we're on right now.
Motion to reconsider the
Well,
no?
Amend this one first if you
You gotta
want.
amend this one first, if that's what
Okay.
you wanna do, because we're in a motion and a second for the third item.
So make a motion to amend.
2024-116.
Motion to amend resolution 2024-116 to modify condition 10 to remove or 250,000, whichever is less, and just keep it as 50%.
Is there a second? I'll second it. Discussion? Anybody have any issues with changing that language? All right, then I'll call the question. All those in favor of amending the resolution by changing item number 10 in the conditions, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, the amendment stands. And I'll call the question on resolution 2024-116. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes for resolution 2024-116. Here you go.
Move to reconsider the vote on resolution 2024-114.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion?
Move to amend.
We have a motion to amend. Is
Not
there a
yet.
second?
Second.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, ma'am.
first you have to do the motion to reconsider to get it back on the table, and then you can amend
Okay,
away.
all those in favor for the motion to reconsider, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right.
Move to amend condition 10 Exactly the same way we just did in Resolution 116.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. So we have an amendment to the motion. All those in favor of the amendment to the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right. The motion has been amended. All those in favor of Resolution 2024-114 as amended, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Amended Resolution 2024-114, it passes.
And motion to reconsider the vote on resolution 2024-115.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for reconsidering the vote on Resolution 2024-115. All those in favor of the motion to reconsider, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Keeping all this straight in the notes, Julie?
It's giving you a few more chances.
It's really
to
taxing.
Please signify
on me.
by.
And is there, so then somebody has a motion to amend?
Motion to amend Resolution 2024-115 in the same manner as was done with Resolution 116.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to amend Resolution 2024-115 with language changing item number 10. All those in favor of the amendment, please signify by saying aye.
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 The amendment passes.
Discussion item.
Oh, you have a discussion item, okay.
Because we didn't do a final discussion on the CUP, and one thing I wanted to say was, this really, I think something for residents is something to be proud of, is you had multiple layers of local government, not necessarily on the same page, each had competing ideas and competing things to get done, but they worked through a process, and they found solutions, and that really is a good thing. You don't always see that where you have, in this case, 4 layers. The county, a school district, a city, and a watershed. And they all had to come to a place where there's something to get to this place. It doesn't mean it's perfect, it's not. I wish there were far more space on the south side for more trees, there is not. And that is a watershed issue. But I take great satisfaction in the fact that you had local government come together. And that's something to be proud of. The other thing I just want to mention is that something I would urge the school district moving forward on, and I brought this up as a member of the facilities team as well. We as a city operate on a comprehensive plan going out to 2040. We are already starting our funding for next year to start planning for the 2050 plan. We have a CIP plan, it's out to 10 years. The county has their CIP plan. You have your CIP plan. I would urge the school district, when we start to get ready for our 2050 plan, and every one of your partner cities does, whether it's Baytown Township, whether it's Stillwater Township, Afton, all of your partner cities, please participate in that process. No one in this room is to blame for this, but when the 2040 process occurred, there was not a conversation. So that is one of the reasons why we had to have a conversation about location, about planning for the 2040 plan, because there wasn't a site identified. And that's no one's fault for anyone in this room. But I would urge the district, and also I've told this to Mahmudai when I had a meeting with them last week, this process is going to be starting, and it's a collaborative partnership. There will be changes. The Met Council will have changes for us, and we'll have to figure out how to do that. Whether that means a change that might need to happen for 834 in Lake Elmo or in Northern Wood, wherever it is, it's going to be someplace. But it might not be until 20 years out. But just please be a part of those conversations. And I have full confidence that the current staffing with the district is going to be on the same page in terms of the importance of having those conversations. And I have full confidence that the city staff and our consultants that we will have will do the same. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you. So I'll call the question on the amended resolution 2024-115. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. We're done with item 20. Finally. Thank you. All right, item 21 is approve well 2 PFAS treatment general construction plan and specifications and authorize advertisement for bids, resolution 2024-117.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Asking tonight for the council to approve the plans and specifications and order the advertisement of bids so that we have a bid date for our water treatment plant at well number 2. This is the project schedule I have up here. As you may recall, we are procuring this project through 3 contracts. So we have a total budget of $2,283,000 that was awarded as a MPCA grant, and we approved that grant agreement on October 1st. The treatment vessels have been ordered through Aqueous Vets. The council awarded that contract on October 15th, so we have the treatment vessels, cartridge, and filter media that's been contracted for and is now ordered. Well 2 generator, the council also approved those plans and specifications for the procurement of that on October 15th, and we have a bid date coming up. We'll be coming back on November 19th to award that contract. And then tonight, we're looking to approve the plans and specifications for the remaining component, and this is really the general contract for the building modifications and putting the whole plan together, starting up the treatment plant and putting it online. So we have a bid date scheduled for December 5th, and we'll be coming back to the council in the second meeting in December to award that contract. And then everything will be in construction. So what this includes, this is a well 2 location. The site is located right at the corner between Sanctuary and Carriage Station neighborhoods up in the northeast corner of the city. So we have an existing well house with well 2. As we've mentioned before, there already is an extra open building that used to have a in-house generator and also a hydromatic tank. So it had 2 extra rooms, so we had added space in this building already. So we have a well house on the north end of the building, and then already a large area that can be vacated and can fit the treatment equipment. So that's kind of our existing conditions. Quick at the building, you can see there's an existing garage door. On the side, there's open screens that open areas that will need to be closed in, things like that for building modifications. So this is the floor plan of the existing building on the top. The bottom starts to show an area shaded out. That's the area that we're gonna work in. Basically, we're gonna cut out the floor, the concrete floor, everything below it. We're gonna take those screens out. We're gonna take the wall out and the garage door on the one side. So that's kind of just a removals plan. We'll be taking out the roof. And then we basically fill in those spaces that were graded into a brick veneer. We're gonna put a new, higher, taller garage door in place with a side door, finish that wall up, pour new flooring, new floor drains, and then those little rectangles you see there are basically concrete pads that are gonna be poured to mount the equipment onto. So that's kind of building the building back up and getting it ready for the equipment. On the other side, on the well house side, in the darker shaded areas, we're gonna be putting in new mag meters, a few new, replacing some of the piping so that we have sort of rearranged the chemical feed. The well pump, you can kind of see there in the circle. We'll be pulling the entire well pump out there, looking at the sand in the well. If there's too much sand, we'll be bailing out some of the sand to get the well rehabbed a little bit. Put a new pump in, new motor, and a new variable frequency drive on the motor so that the well has a little bit higher, stronger capacity to push it through the added head loss from the treatment facility. Then we basically receive the equipment we've already procured, and that basically just slides in through the big garage door. And then there's a whole piping and valve tree assembly that will get connected up to those 2 treatment vessels and the treatment cartridge. You put that in the building. This is kind of a cross-section approach to that. I've shown a photo of different facilities showing kind of what that looks like. You can also see it's a pretty tall structure. They're about 14, 15 feet to the height, so we are raising the roof on that part of the building as well. And so then this is sort of just a schematic of what that new building section looks like. So you can see the roof line on that second half of the building has now been raised and is higher than the first half, whereas today they're basically the same height. And then you can see the taller garage door on the one side for moving the equipment or the vessels, pulling them in and out. And then there's also not shown as electrical modifications and control modifications that are included in the packet as well. So that's what we have here for you tonight to approve and get out for bids. So, yeah, stand for questions.
City engineer? No? All right, then I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve Resolution 2024-117, approving the plans and specs and ordering the advertisement for bids for well number 2 water treatment plant.
I have a second.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of approving resolution number 2024-117, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Resolution passes. Thank you.
Thank
Jack.
you.
Thank you, Jack.
Number 22 is EDA appointment and reappointment. Gonna make a motion to reappoint Nina Waldock to the Economic Development Authority for a term of ending 12/31/27. Second. We have a motion and a second for reappointment. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Make a motion to appoint Brandon Quam to the Economic Development Authority for a term ending in 12/31/27.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor in appointing Mr. Brandon Quam to the Economic Development Authority for a term ending 12/31/27, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, the appointment is approved. Thank you. That ends our regular agenda. Council reports.
No report this evening, Mayor.
Councilmember Holtz.
The Montemita School District last week had their quarterly meeting for partner cities that they are part of. So as the liaison for the city, I went, and there's pretty good discussion, good updates around, but the main thing I think for Lake Elmo residents who are within the Montemita School District to be aware, they did do a facilities review within the district, and one of their goals is they are looking to expand indoor athletic facilities. And there'll be more coming out, but it is based upon a very public participation-driven process that occurred over the last 6 to 12 months. I'm sure there'll be more information coming out, so pay attention to their website for more updates. But they, like many districts and municipalities in the area, are continuing to look for more ways to provide activity space, whether it's indoor or outdoor, for, in this case, it's for adults and students.
Thank you. Some people may have noticed that yesterday was a voting day, and just wanted to extend a thank you and a congratulations to Julie and her team on. I did stop by, even though I voted early yesterday, and you know, staff and whoever had to make things up, and all the people that worked the election. Things looked to be moving smoothly. Didn't see any crazy posts about polling locations or anything. I know that it was generally congested in the area, having two precinct polling locations so close to each other, but job well done. Thank you very much. I know that's sometimes goes unseen, what happens behind the scenes, so I think that's important, and citizens of Lake Elmo should be happy that that Julie and her team does such a great job. Councilmember Hurd?
Obviously, you're gonna hit on this next, but I just want to give a thanks for this future agenda items. I just really, I do appreciate this. It's kind of funny that now that I see it, I kind of wonder why we've never had it in the past, actually. It's just, it's gonna be really helpful to have that. So obviously, I think you guys will be talking about that more, but thank you for doing that.
All right, moving into staff reports.
Well,
Look
just
at it.
like Councilmember Hearn said, it's really been the effort of all of the staff to add items to that future agenda list, and it helps us to keep organized, also be transparent with the community and what's coming up, but it takes all of us, and it's definitely subject to change, and so let us know if you have any feedback, but thank you to all the staff for participating and always working in it every day.
So question for the special meeting next week, will then that require us to meet earlier? Say at 6 instead of 6:30
Yes,
workshop?
yeah, I'd like to suggest 6:15. It's for canvassing the election results. It's one resolution, one vote. It's
Okay.
extremely fast. We only canvass our local results. The other results are canvassed by the state and the county.
Perfect, okay, thank you. You have any other reports, Ms. Johnson?
I'd just like to add to what you said and thank all of our staff. Our election judges do an amazing job. They're required by the state to have at least 2 hours of training outside of election day, and they all put in more time than that even. And thank the fire department. They were really, really helpful, even without being asked, just showing up and removing all of the signs in the rain and the dark, which I really appreciated, and just offering a helping hand. So that was great. And you are correct, we did have, no major incidents, everything balanced, and went very smoothly. Voters seemed to be very happy with the experience yesterday. So we just would like a few more parking places here.
Right.
I'll talk to you about that later.
All right.
I don't have any updates, thank you.
Thank you.
No report.
No report.
No report.
No report.
Just want to offer a reminder, we had a gas leak reported on Facebook on Halloween night, and just want to give a reminder to residents, if you ever smell the odor of gas, use 911, use the emergency system that's in place for us to respond. We don't monitor Facebook 24/7, but it was a gas leak at a building, and so it was an emergency incident that had to be handled right away, so we're.
That generally smells like
Rotten eggs, yep.
Sulfur.
Yep, and if you smell it for a while, call 911, we can get that investigation started immediately, so. Just want to offer that reminder out. We have staff around 24/7, that's what they're here for.
Thank you. Jack?
Just one quick update, they're now moving dirt for the Bridgewater Bank development. Next week, they're hoping to get started. It's sort of a tentative start, but they're hoping to start on utilities, which would be a water main connection at Little Bluestrem Trail, the entrance to Fields of St. Croix, so there'll be a 3 to 4 day closure in that vicinity along Stillwater Way in order to get that water main connected and over to the site, and then they'll go interior to the site from there.
All right, thank you. Ms. Sensala?
Mayor and council, I'm working with the Carriage Station HOA to get the Carriage Station Park transferred over to the city, so that's been ongoing.
Great.
We're making some progress.
Thank you. With that, we'll adjourn the meeting at 9:03.